Hey guys, so it's me again. So today, as the title of the video suggests, today's video is going to be today's video is going to be about Ray Fisher's newest expose, as such, on the Hollywood Reporter, and officially what went down. And man, it is there are a lot of goodies in this. And I'm gonna read it all to you and to give my insight for it. So first it starts off with the writer of this article saying that Warner Brothers did not want her to put this story out, which shout out to Kim for putting this out and with his journalistic integrity. So yeah, thank you for that. So let's go to the article. Oh, here it is. Over the past year, the actor has assailed the filmmaker and studio in harsh but crypt. So here we are. So it's titled "Ray Fisher opens up about Justice League, Joss Whedon, and Warner's. I don't believe some of these people are fit for leadership." Over the past year, the actor has assailed the filmmaker and studio in harsh but cryptic tweets for what he says was racist and inappropriate conduct. I'm not indebted to Hollywood that I haven't been willing to put my that I haven't been willing to put myself out there. Ray Fisher is ready to talk. Um, ever since June 2020, when he fired off a tweet accusing Joss Whedon of gross, abusive, and unprofessional and completely unacceptable behavior conduct on the set of Justice League. The 33-year-old actor has used social media and a series of interviews to lob serious allegations of racist behavior and a cover up at Warner Brothers. So here we are. So for Fisher, who plays Cyborg in the film, the issue is no longer so much that helped on the set in 2017 after director Zack Snyder was replaced by Joss Whedon, though he's ready to explain that too. His unrelenting focus in recent months has been the way executives first at Warner first at the Warner Film Studio and then at its parent, Warner Media, handled allegations raised by himself and others. Now, what I want to point out here is before it was just the Warner Brothers Film Studio that got involved in all this. Now, if you remember a while ago, I made a whole message video to both Warner companies and AT&T in particular, and I was talking to AT&T in a positive light. And the reason why I was doing that was because of AT&T has been really silent in this kind of scenario. So really, I think AT&T, it's only a matter of time before they get involved, and I think John Berg knows that, get as we'll soon find out later in this article. Warner Media has previously said that remedial action has been taken as a result of its investigation, but has not elaborated. A spokesperson tells him, the Hollywood Reporter, that for privacy and legal reasons, our policy is to not publicly disclose the findings or results of an investigation. Now, that right there, I can't really understand, but the thing about this right here is like, like the thing that I find suspicious about this line in particular, our policy is to not publicly disclose the findings or the results of an investigation. Now, the one thing that I find that I agree with is like, okay, so you can't tell the public of what went down and what was found during the investigation, but for some reason you can't tell the witnesses what was found during the investigation. Like, that to me just doesn't make any sense right there. So it's like, once again, if you really do read into this line, it's like, it's okay. Like, I can really understand you who not publicly say, not, I can really understand why they wouldn't put this out to the public, but as for the witnesses, I don't know why they didn't tell them what was found. Catherine Forrest, a former federal judge who conducted the Warner Media probe, tells the Hollywood Reporter in a statement that in interviews with more than 80 witnesses, she found no credible support for claims of racial animus or racial insensitivity. A Warner Media spokesperson notes that the company made extraordinary efforts to accommodate Mr. Fisher's concerns about the investigation and to ensure its fullness and fairness, and has complete confidence in the investigation process and Forrest's conclusions. Now, that's the thing right there. Like, really, people go on and tell Ray, like, the details of, people are demanding the details of what Ray is talking about, and he's giving us the details bit by bit. But the thing that infuriates me is people who aren't asking who that the Ray Fisher haters are. They're not saying, like, they're not pressing Warner Media about this, like what was found, like really, like what was found in this scenario. Like I said, like, hypothetically, if this policy is true, like, it's okay if you don't tell the public this, fine. But why didn't you tell the witnesses what was found? Really makes you think. Fisher was raised by a single mother and his grandmother in Lawnside, New Jersey, a community that he notes was the first self-governing black community metropolis north of the Mason-Dixon line. He says he felt a new sense of urgency to speak out when the pandemic hit and the Black Lives Matter protesters took to the streets. So there's a little bit of background there. To Fisher, who had few screen credits playing the half-man, half-machine cyborg, the first black superhero in the DC film universe, was both a huge career break and a major responsibility. Just with the Black Panther, he was mindful that the film was overseen almost entirely by white executives and filmmakers. While Fisher has dropped the details and named names, now that right there, like it really good. Now that right there really goes back to what I said. Ray has been giving details about what went down, but for some reason, the investigators won't do the same to at least the witnesses on what was found and the results of the investigation. That, once again, that really doesn't make any sense. Like that really doesn't. Uh, Outsiders have struggled to understand how did Whedon incur his anger. Did Fisher really decline to participate in an investigation that was launched in response to his own complaints as Warner's? And I like how Kim here is using Warner's and not Warner Brothers or Warner Media, because she's using Warner's here as in like both Warners, like Warner Brothers and Warner Media. So I like that Kim is using both, that Kim is using Warner's in general. Warner's claimed in September, was Fisher fighting a righteous battle or a quixotic one when he set out on a path that appears to have cost him a place in the DC film universe? Now, in many hours in conversation, Fisher tells his side. Fisher tells his side, and right here I just like this, and really right here I want you to pay attention to this right here for the naysayers about this, because this is important if this does continue and more actors do come out, because Kim specifies this is Ray's side of the story. This isn't how it all was. This is only Ray's side of the story. And I really do like that Kim did specify that right here in this article. Much of his previous reluctance to spell out the story, he says, arose because he didn't, and it still doesn't, want to expose the identities of others who shared their stories with him and investigators. Now, that right there, once again, this really does solidify that this is only his side of the story, and he's not going to reveal anything other than his side of the story. So that's it. I'm not looking to have any witnesses lose their jobs, he says. Those include some who wouldn't seem to have any worries about job security. Gal Gadot and Jason Momoa. Others who were not involved with Justice League also spoke to Fisher, and in some cases, the investigators about experiences with Whedon and with Geoff Johns, who was co-chairman of DC Films and a producer on the film. They include Charisma Carpenter, who recently wrote on social media of Whedon's alleged abusiveness on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and individuals who had worked on with Johns on Sci-Fi's Krypton. Fisher got Warner's to start an investigation, more than 2 years after the first version of the film was released. But he soon found the process to be suspicious. The studio and its parent company, and I like how once again she's specifying the studio and its parent company, Warner Media, seemed to be focused on protecting top executives. He says the process moved in starts and stops, and when he felt forced to ramp up his public protest, the studio responded with what Fisher calls a deliberate smear. Both Warner's and Warner Brothers and Warner Media, maintains it has done everything necessary to address Fisher's concerns. He still wants an apology. In May 2017, Fisher was walking into a movie in New York when he got a call from Zack Snyder that left him stunned. Snyder was leaving Justice League, citing his daughter's suicide. Sources say Snyder was under enormous pressure at the time. The studio was unhappy with the reception and the box office performance of its previous film, the bleak Batman v Superman, and with Justice League footage already shot. Now, instead, on a lighter touch, Warner's also asked Snyder to produce a 2-hour cut. He had a wrenching time delivering, though eventually did. Ultimately, Snyder left, and Whedon, who had written and directed Marvel's The Avengers, had already been brought in to help brighten Justice League's tone, took the helm. The Justice League that Fisher had signed up for was a far cry from the film that Whedon ended up finishing. Snyder had Fisher talk at length with screenwriter Chris Terrio before there was even a script. Zack and I always considered Cyborg's story to be the heart of the movie, Terrio says. Terrio tells Hollywood Reporter. He was the most pronounced actor. He was the most pronounced character arc of any of the heroes, beginning from a place of despair and ending with the feeling that he is whole and that he is loved. And Terrio says he and Snyder took the portrayal of the first black superhero in the DC film universe very seriously, adding, with a white writer and white director, we both thought having the perspective of an actor of color was really important. And Ray is really good with story and character. He became a partner in writing Victor, referring to the character's name given. And that right there, like, he was actually part of the writing process, and you could really understand why right there he was mad about it. He was mad about all the stuff that Chris, and Zach did got scrapped away pretty much. When new filming proceeded under Whedon, says Fisher, he came to feel that he had to explain some of the most basic points of what would be offensive to the black community. After Fisher's reps were told that Whedon planned to make major revisions to the film, he flew from New Jersey to meet with the filmmaker. In LA, when the two met at a bar, Fisher says Whedon was tiptoeing around the fact that everything was changing. As he left the meeting, Fisher was handed the revised script, which he read twice on the plane back. Gone was Cyborg's traumatic backstory, his relationship with his mother, whose loving scenes with her son were eliminated, as was the accident that killed her and led to his transformation, and the material was restored, and the Snyder Cut version is on HBO Max. It represents that his parents are two genius level black people. Fisher says that we don't see that every day. Whedon sent out an email asking for questions, comments, or fulsome praise, but Fisher says it became clear all he was looking for was the fulsome praise, trying to strike a jocular tone. Fisher responded that he mourned the loss of the Cyborg material, but was moving on. So for those right there who are saying that, oh, why didn't he say this before? Like, he said right there he was trying to move on, and it really, you could kind of see the same thing that happens with everyone. Like, everyone tries to move on from something else, like Charisma Carpenter. A recent example is Charisma Carpenter and the Buffy cast recently coming out and exposing what Joss did with Buffy the Vampire Slayer that I believe ended in 2004. So, yeah, he was trying to move on, but he couldn't move on. He said he had notes to avoid issues in terms of representation of the character, but in a call with Whedon, Fisher says he had barely started to talk when the filmmaker cut him off. It feels like I'm taking notes right now, and I don't like taking notes from anybody, not even Robert Downey Jr. And speaking of Robert Downey Jr., like, people really aren't asking the major question right here. is where's the Avengers cast and where's Disney coming out defending Joss Whedon, who did the first Avengers movie? Now, and I actually do know kind of a bit of a story where where Jeremy Renner, I think his name is Jeremy Renner. He actually had a few problems with Joss Whedon and with him wanting more with him, because Jeremy Renner. Side note here: Jeremy Renner, for example, this is actually common knowledge, was really against Joss Whedon in the first Avengers movie where he was faking his heart attack, and he would because he wanted his character to be treated with more respect and not just really a side villain. And as you see in Avengers Age of Ultron, that did happen. Hawkeye did get more story, and I guess he was satisfied. And there are also some rumors with Scarlett Johansson and Joss as well, but that's a completely different story. He said other sources on the project say Whedon was similarly dismissive of Gal Gadot, and Momoa when they questioned the new lines. Whedon declined to comment for this piece. Obviously, he never does respond. Fisher turned to Johns, who he says had presented himself as a kind of mediator, but Fisher says his ultimate response was, "We can't make Joss mad." Now, right there, we are gonna have a response, and I'm gonna tell you why that response was really bad. Publicist Howard Bragman, who represents Johns, and really just keep paying attention to this, Publicist Howard Bragman, who represents Johns, he represents him. He doesn't speak for him. That's the thing. That's the thing. I really don't care what a representative says. I'm not shooting the messenger here, but a representative to me is really like a robot who doesn't speak for anyone. He's just trying to make something seem nicer than it is. So this is nothing about his Jeff Johns rep. He's doing his job. But I'm just saying that I don't believe Jeff Johns rep until Jeff Johns himself said something. Which, speaking of Jeff Johns, he hasn't tweeted anything on his own accord. He hasn't tweeted, period, since a few years now. He hasn't used Twitter at all. So that to me is really telling. Okay, so his rep denies that, but it says Johns recalls suggesting that any creative pinches should happen when Joss Whedon was not preoccupied, so he would be more receptive. Now that right there really does correlate with the quote. We can't make Joss mad. recalls suggesting that any creative pitches should happen when Joss Whedon was not preoccupied, so he would be most receptive, aka he would not be mad. Once Whedon got involved, Fisher says that Johns told him that it was problematic that Cyborg smiled only twice in the movie. Fisher says he later learned from a witness who participated in the investigation that Johns and other top executives, including then DC Films co-chairman John Berg and Warner Studio chief Toby Emmerich, had discussions in which they said they could not have an angry black man at the center of the film. John's rep, and I'm going to be responding to John's representative a lot in this. So John's rep responds that once the chairman of the studio mandated a brighter tone for the film, all further discussion centered on adding joy and hopefulness to all 6 superheroes. There are always conversations about avoiding stereotype of race, gender, or sexuality. Now that right there, once again, is making something nice, but at the same time, you can't have an angry black man at the center of the film. Now, how does this make any sense where he didn't want, like, let's just say he didn't want an angry black man at the center of the film. Fine. But the problematic part is right here. Where is it? Yeah, where Cyborg only smiled twice in the 2017 cut. In the Snyder cut, which I've actually seen a lot, Cyborg actually smiles a lot. So this right here doesn't match with this. With this and this. Like, it doesn't match up. It doesn't match up. Because in the Snyder Cut, he did smile a lot more. So, yeah. Johns told Fisher he should play the character less like Frankenstein and more like the kind-hearted Quasimodo. Now, for those who don't know the Hunchback of Notre Dame or Quasimodo, Quasimodo was really more like a slave in that movie. Like, I need to stay here. He was kind, but he was actually kind of like a slave too, in a sense. While Frankenstein, he was his own entity. Quasimodo was really following orders without question. So that right there really doesn't it's just like, wow. Fisher says that in order to demonstrate the look he wanted, Johns dipped his shoulder in what struck Fisher as a survival posture. To Fisher, there was a big difference between portraying a character who was born with a disability versus one who has been transformed by trauma. Now that right there is fact. Like, there is actually a huge difference between that. There is a huge difference between that. And he felt Cyborg was a kind of modern day Frankenstein, which I actually did too, because it's like he kind of comes back from the dead. He's really kind of like his own entity in that sense. I didn't have any intention of playing him jovial as a jovial cathedral cleaning individual, he says. John's representative responds, Jeff gave a note using a fictional character as an example of a sympathetic man who is unhappy and has an inclination to hide from the world, but one whom the audience roots for because he has a courageous heart. Bro, and once again, this is John's rep saying that, and I'm responding to Jeff John's rep again. Bruh, wait, this whole thing doesn't make any sense because that's exactly what happened in the Snyder Cut anyway. So what you're saying here, John's rep, isn't really saying anything because it's in the Snyder Cut anyway. All the difference is Quasimodo. So what you're saying here is a moot point. Fisher told Johns it might be one thing for a non-black man to write a character for a comic, but it was another for a black actor to portray that character on screen. It was like he was assuming how black people would respond rather than taking the advice from the only black person, as far as I know, with any kind of creative impact on the project, Fisher says. Yes, absolutely. I completely do agree with that. He was the only, as far as I know, and as far as the people know, he was really the only black person to actually be a part of the creative process. And yeah. Fisher says Johns did not yield. Fisher says Johns did not yield. And that was the last creative conversation about anything that Jeff Johns and I had. I knew I was on my own. Fisher says John's rep, and here we go again. I'm gonna rush this one again. John's rep denies that he ever dismissed any comments, adding that Fisher knew Johns, whose spokesperson requested that he be identified as Alabama's American, had evolved. Traditionally, all white DC properties like Shazam, the Justice Society of America, and others into diverse groups of heroes. In his extensive work as a comic book author. Now that right there, once again, let's go. Now, Jeff Johns rep, let's go back up here. Fisher says it is different, said it was different. It's different to actually write a character to be a certain way in a comic book. but you're asking a person to act like that in a movie. So, and you again specify him as a comic book author, not him as a movie person, because once again, making a movie is a teamwork medium. You can write something, but the person has to agree to do it. Like as of right now, with for example, the Frosty the Snowman announcement where Jason Momoa is supposed to be Frosty the Snowman. Let's hypothetically say that story is still true and they even double down on the Frosty the Snowman movie. Like, let's hypothetically say that's true. Like, Jason Momoa can turn that role down. Like, you can say, hey, we want you to be Frosty the Snowman. Jason Momoa can turn that down. Like, so you see what I mean? Like, a comic book author is different from a movie medium. So his rep is really messing up right now. And I get it, you're doing your job, but do better. Justice League producer Chuck Robin, a veteran on DC superhero films dating back on Batman Begins in 2005, says, I fully empathize with Ray that his character arc was significantly altered, shortened. I've also collaborated with Jeff many years and found him as a gracious, humble man. And Jeff took it upon himself to put Cyborg in the Justice League comics in the first place, and it has written more about the character than any other individual that for the creator. He loves the character Cyborg. Now, that right there, this whole thing is still talking about him as a comic book guy. It's not him talking about him in the movies. Like, everyone who's saying that this is a comic book thing, separate the comic book guy from the movie guy. Simple enough. All these tensions were playing out during an extremely stressful time at the studio. AT&T's $85 billion acquisition of Time Warner, which was announced in October 2016, but didn't close until June 18, was still pending. Justice League was a $300 million proposition, and it was troubled. Warner's had not been able to match Disney's consistent success with the Marvel movies. Fisher felt some of the studio executives' decision making was by fear of losing their jobs. And this right here, and this next paragraph, man, this next paragraph is gonna make me go on a little bit of a rant. The tension only escalated when the issue of having Cyborg say "Booyah" arose. That phrase had become a signature of the character thanks to the animated Teen Titans show. But the character had never said it in the comics or in the original script. Fisher says that Johns had approached Snyder about including the line, but the director didn't want any catchphrases. He managed the situation by putting the word on some signs in his version of the film as an Easter egg. But John's rep says the entire studio believed the Booyah line was a fun moment of synergy. That came out of nowhere though. Like there really was no setup for it and there was no need for it. Like there really was no need for it. Fisher says he doesn't see the word in itself as an issue, neither do I, but he thought it played differently in a live action film than the animated series. And he thought of the black characters in pop culture with the defining phrases Gary Coleman's "What You Talking About, Willis?" Jimmy Walker's Dynamite, as no one else in the film had a catchphrase, he says. It seemed weird to have the only black character say that. And let's take race out of that equation. Like, let's just say that he was the only character in general to say booyah or have his catchphrase said. Like, it would be weird. It would have been weird. Like, you don't see Wonder Woman in either Wonder Woman, BVS, either versions of Justice League, or even Wonder Woman 1984, say Great Hera, which is her catchphrase. And the same thing with Batman. You don't hear Ben Affleck say I'm Batman. Like it doesn't make any sense for him to be the only character to say his catchphrase. With reshoots underway, Fisher says Whedon raised the issue again. Jeff tells me Cyborg has a catchphrase. He told him. Fisher says he expressed his objections and it seemed the matter was dropped. Until Berg, the co-chairman of DC Films and a producer on the project, took him to dinner. And this right here, man. This right here. This next one, man, really does show how low they were going at the time. This is one of the most expensive movies Warner's has ever made. Berg said according to Fisher. What if the CEO of AT&T has a son or daughter, and that right there, like this right here, I just completely lost it because this is a real supervillain stuff right here to me. Like, what if the CEO of AT&T, aka my boss, has a son or daughter? I don't want to lose my job, and like, dude, you never use like a third party who's family into this. Like, you never do that. Like, like I don't think that needs to be said, but you don't use a third party, especially your boss, and bring him into this. Like, this is your issue, dude. And so what if my boss has a son or daughter, and that son or daughter wants Cyborg to say booyah? Like, booyah in the movie, and we don't have a take of that. Bro, that's just so like, can you be like, I want to ask everyone who's watching this right now who have kids, And for for those who had for those who have kids and those kids have seen the Snyder Cut, have any of your kids asked you why didn't Cyborg say booyah in the Snyder Cut? Thought so. I could lose my job. Bro. So, Fisher responded that he knew if he filmed the line, it would end up in the movie. And he expressed skepticism that the film's fate rested on Cyborg saying booyah. But he shot the take. As he arrived on set, he says Whedon stretched out his arms and said a line from Hamlet in a mocking tone. Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you. Fisher replied, Joss, don't, I'm not in the mood. As he left the set after saying just that one phrase for the cameras, he says, Whedon called out, nice work, Ray. Even before the line was shot, Fisher's agent had called Warner Film Studio chief Emmerich to raise concerns about what was happening on set. After Fisher arrived in Los Angeles for additional photography in summer of the 2017 reshoots, Johns asked him to come to the DC offices in Burbank. When they met in a conference room, Fisher said he had apologized to Whedon for his part in the conflict, which he had done in the hope of preventing a real rupture with the DC team. Johns responded with having agents call Emmerich, but it's just not cool. Fisher recalls, he said, I consider us to be friends. Now, and you know what? Now listen to you, which you knew we were not. And I just don't want you to make a bad name for yourself in the business. And for those who are saying that he's stretching it, I've actually been at the receiving end of that. Someone saying, I was actually in kind of this meeting, one-on-one meeting, and someone and it was basically about something else entirely. And I have my hands on the desk like this, and the person I was talking to, was actually touching my hands, saying, I do consider us friends, and I want to help you out. And do you want to know what happened after that? The person got fired. The person got fired, and that's what happened to that. And I'm telling you right now, we weren't friends. So this right here is a very it's really a tactic that a lot of people do use. Fisher took that as a threat, and John's rep says he never made a threat but told Fisher that creative differences were not normally taken to the head of a film studio by an actor's agent. Now that right there, like you don't want to make yourself look bad, and really that right there is really what the rep says is really is really more like a threat. Like it really is more like lightening the threat a little bit. Fisher was not the only Justice League star who was unhappy. Sources say Whedon clashed with all the stars of the film, especially with the rumor being kind of confirmed with Ben Affleck, but that's a whole different thing. And including Jeremy Irons, and one Justice League star ended up taking her complaints not only to the head of the film studio, but also the chairman of Warner Brothers. A knowledgeable source says Gadot had multiple concerns with the revised version of the script, including issues about her character being more aggressive than her character in Wonder Woman. She wanted to make the character flow from one movie to the next. And really like with the amount of sexualizing Wonder Woman in Justice League, that really is another term. Like not even just more aggressive. So yeah. The biggest clash, sources say, came when Whedon pushed Gadot to record the lines she didn't like, threatened to, and this right here, really does go back to something more like you probably seen like the leaked script of Joss Whedon's old scrapped Wonder Woman. Like, dude, you dude, I'm really like I can only imagine what Joss Whedon wanted Gal to say, and wanted Gal to originally say in Justice League. Like that is insane. Especially if you go back once again to the original Wonder Woman script that Joss Whedon wanted to do himself. Like it is just threatened to harm Gadot's career is this is disparted threatened to harm Gadot's career and disparaged Wonder Woman director Patty Jenkins. And for those who don't know what disparage means, like let's actually find out what that means together. Because I really do think that you guys should actually get more stuff out of this. So expressing the opinion that something is of a little worth and deprecating. So That right there is he didn't care. So straight up right here, like hey, for those who now know what it means, like he, for those who don't know what big words mean, like Joss really didn't care what Patty put in. Like like that should really say something about Joss as a director. While Fisher declines to discuss any of what transpired with Godot, a witness of the production who later spoke to investigators say that after one clash, Joss was bragging that he's had it out with Gal. He told her he's the writer and she's going to shut up and say the lines, and he can make her look incredibly stupid in this movie. That speaks for itself. A knowledgeable source says Godot and Jenkins went to battle, culminating in a meeting with then Warner's chairman Kevin Tsujihara. As for comment, Godot says in a statement, I had my issues with Whedon and Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers handled it in a timely manner with the help of Deborah Snyder. 3 months after Justice League hit theaters, Whedon exited Warner's Batgirl project. Batgirl is such an exciting project, and Warner Brothers DC is collaborative supporting partners that blah 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 at the time. So yeah, when Whedon opened in November 2017, the film was banned. It was a 40% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and grossed a disappointing $685 million worldwide. Berg exited his job that December. Johns departed the following June. But Whedon was still part of the Warner Media universe in July 2018. A few months after he left Batgirl, HBO greenlighted his drama The Nevers straight to series. But in November 2020, just a couple of weeks before Warner Media said it had taken remedial steps after its investigation into Justice League, Whedon left the project too. And it didn't have anything to do with his behavior of the series. This time, Whedon said he was not up to the physical challenge. He wasn't up to the physical challenges of making such a huge show during a global pandemic. Warner's issued a clip, "We have parted ways with Joss Whedon," aka he was fired because of what was found out. After Justice League, Fisher went to play Mahershala Ali's son in the 3rd season of True Detective, which he calls a great experience. But in the coming months, he would hear fresh reports about what had it gone behind the scenes on Justice League, including the angry black man conversation and other allegations involving Johns, two individuals who worked on Sci-Fi's Krypton TV series, talked to Fisher about events that had taken place on the series. Multiple sources tell Hollywood Reporter that the show's creators are passionate about doing some non-traditional casting, and that Regé, hope I'm pronouncing this right, Regé-Jean Page, hope I pronounced that right, who would go on to become a breakout star in Bridgerton? Never heard of that. Had auditioned for the role of Superman's grandfather. But Johns, who was overseeing the project, said Superman could not have a black grandfather. The creators also wanted to make one superhero character, Adam Strange, gay or bisexual, but sources say Johns vetoed the idea. And here we go again. Jeff his rep again. And Jeff celebrates and supports LGBTQ characters, including Batwoman, who in 2016 was reintroduced in the comic book series co-written by Johns, once again illustrating the comic book part of it. Says Johns rep in a email. Johns also pitched Warner Brothers in developing a television show around the first LGBTQ lead DC character TV series, he adds. Okay. As for the role of Superman's grandfather, the rep says Johns believed fans expected the character to look like a young Henry Cavill. Now, if that's true, so be it. But at the same time, they didn't have Zod looking like a young Michael Shannon. And for those who don't know, who haven't seen Krypton, the black person in this picture right here is supposed to be Zod in Krypton. Enough said. Several sources who spoke to Fisher around the time were willing to talk to a Warner's investigator. Among them was writer Nadria Tucker, who tweeted February 24th, "I haven't spoken to Geoff Johns since the day on Krypton when he tried to tell me who it is and it's not a black thing." Tucker tells the Hollywood Reporter that Johns objected when a black female character's hairstyle was changed in scenes that took place on different days. As he said, black women, we tend to change our hair frequently, and it's not weird. It's a black thing, she says. And he said, no, it's not. And that's really the thing. Like, and like, that's really the thing. Like, can you imagine that, like, someone who isn't black knows what a black thing is? Like, That doesn't make any sense. Okay. John's spokesperson says what were standard continuity notes for a scene is that being spun in a way that are not only personally offensive to Jeff, but to the people that know who he is, know the work he's done, and know the life he lives. As Jeff personally has seen firsthand the painful effects of racial stereotypes concerning hair and other cultural stereotypes. Having been married to a black woman was who he was with a decade with his with his second wife who is Asian American, as well as his son who is a mixed child. Now, let's see here. Let's go down the notes right here. Continuity, spun. So, what were standard continuity for a scene are being spun in a way that are not personally offensive to Jeff. Now, let's just talk about those continuity notes. Those continuity notes were happened on are scenes that were taking place a few days later. So why, like, these are complaints about something that's small anyway. Like, no one would have cared if her hair changed in a matter of days. Like, that's a really common thing. Like, people would want to have this look. Like, it's like people like it's like what this is doing is kind of like complaining about people changing clothes and wearing different clothes every single day. This is what this is what his spokesperson is trying to defend right here. But late June, Fisher went public with his dissatisfaction at what he viewed as Warner's inaction for their part. Warner's sources contend with that Fisher was being manipulated by Snyder, who hoped to reclaim control of the DC film universe. Did they talk? Did these? Is this referring to? Who is this referring to? What Jody? Is this referring to what? Yeah. Is this referring to what Jody's corner said about with him and with what he learned from Clay Enos? Bro, that is insane. if this really is referring to Jody's Corner's Jody's Corner's video on his video of Clay Enos and what he told and what Clay told him, bro, Hollywood Reporter, you can do better. Fisher says that the assertion that a black man would not have his own agency is just as racist as the conversations Warner leadership was having about the Justice League reshoots. I've been underestimated at every turn during this process, and that's what has led us to this point. Had they taken me as seriously as they should have from the beginning, they would not have been made as many foolish mistakes as they did in the process. Snyder denies any role in influencing Fisher. And boom. And right there, shot down. Tweeting footage of himself praising Whedon at 27 at Comic Con in 2017, Fisher wrote, "I'd like to take a moment and forcefully retract every bit of this statement." In a subsequent tweet, he said Whedon's on-set behavior was gross, abusive, unprofessional, and completely unacceptable, adding he was enabled in many ways by Geoff Johns and Jon Berg. He did not elaborate. Berg told Variety it was categorically untrue that he was enabled any that we enabled any unprofessional behavior. He added that Fisher was upset about saying "booyah," a well-known saying of a cyborg and saying in the anime series. Now that right there is a quote change. That right there is a quote change. The original quote was Variety saying that, and was him saying the comics. He didn't say that in the comics. This is right here is a quote change. So don't believe it. This is a quote change. It is not the animated series that Jon Berg said. It was the comics he originally said. So, in other words, that's a cover-up of the lie. As Fisher continued to air grievances on social media and in some notes and in some interviews, he began to suspect that when he tweeted the studio would put out an announcement to distract from his message. On July 1st, the day that Fisher tweeted about Joss Whedon's behavior, Deadline published an exclusive saying Warner's was making a live-action Frosty the Snowman movie with Aquaman star Jason Momoa voicing the iconic snowman. A few weeks later, Momoa pushed back in an Instagram post. I think it's fucked up that people release a fake Frosty announcement without my permission to try and distract from Ray Fisher. Speaking up about the shitty way we were treated on Justice League reshoots. He wrote, "Serious stuff went down and it needs to be investigated and the people need to be held accountable." Warner says the untitled Snowman comedy remains in development. Which I really don't believe that. Like I said, they doubled down on that. In early July, Fisher spoke with Walter Hamada, who had taken the reins at DC Films. He says Hamada called Joss an asshole and said, "I'm looking to get past anything to do with the Justice League. Joss isn't here anymore, and I don't plan on hiring him again. But according to Fisher, Amada said he did not believe Johns had done anything wrong. I don't know John Berg very well. I know Joss was difficult, but Jeff Ray, he's really getting dragged through the mud, and I'm sure you're getting your share of hate too. Fisher responded, I'm fine with the hate because I know I'm telling the truth. He asked for an investigation. Later that month, the studio's HR department contacted Fisher. He says he spoke with two executives for about 2 hours. He adds he offered specific allegations of abusive behavior toward himself, and others provided the name series of some witnesses willing to be contacted, but he was very cognizant that the HR departments are often known to show more allegiance to the employers than the complaining parties. That is absolutely true. That's absolutely true because they are paying you and the complaining parties aren't paying you. He became even more suspicious, he says, when witnesses started telling him they had not been contacted. Now that right there, boom, right there, that right there. So he he became even more suspicious, he says, when witnesses started telling him they had not been contacted. Now let's go all the way up. Where? Okay. Yeah, so yeah, let's just go back down. Can't find it, seem to find it here. But if you go back to the beginning of this video, when I said that they didn't want, they said that the investigators said that they won't reveal anything to the public, but they didn't contact the witnesses. That is very suspicious. That's very suspicious right there for me. Because once again, it's like why don't you tell the witnesses what happened? I can partially get why you wouldn't want the public to get it out, but for the witnesses to know what was found, that's suspicious. Fisher requested an independent investigator and asked SAG-AFTRA to have a rep with him in the process. In mid-August, Warner's HR exec told Fisher that an outside investigator has had been approved, but his guard went up when the exec said, "We really like him. We worked with him before." Still, Fisher tweeted that this represented a massive step forward. Now, it doesn't say in the article specifically, but if I'm correct, this specific person that he was talking about is this specific investigator. In one of his Instagram videos, he had a meeting with this investigator, and the investigator wasn't taking it seriously, and he and Ray Fisher got immediate bad vibes from it because during the phone call, he heard a microwave in the background to go off. And that to him made him want to get out of the call, which he did. But then a Warner's veteran told Fisher not to trust the investigation if a particular studio exec was overseeing it, because that person had previously helped sweep misconduct under the rug. When he spoke to the investigator, Fisher asked how many times he had worked for the studio. He declined to answer. Fisher asked who was overseeing the inquiry and said he would have an issue if it was the executive named by the contact. He still got no answer. Feeling that the situation felt pretty dodgy, Fisher went no further. And I think that is this right here is him talking about the microwave incident that he was talking about on Instagram. So, yeah, there you go. On August 26th, the investigator provided a name citing an attorney in the general counsel's office. When Fisher looked at the Warner Media site, he found this individual was the only black attorney whose head spot was visible. In fact, the lawyer had nothing to do with the investigation and handled all of the side stuff. Fisher wondered if naming her had been a simple mistake or a ploy to lull him into a sense of security with the idea that she might be on the same team as she simply by way of her being a black person. Feeling more distrustful, Fisher continued to tweet, writing on September 4th that Hamada had thrown Whedon and Berg under the bus while covering for Johns. Unfortunately, not until I start talking about people specifically that the needle starts to move, he says. If they were going to continue to try to cover things up, I wasn't going to let that happen. Fisher then got a call from Berg, who said he was sorry the actor had an appalling experience on Justice League and he hadn't been able to help. acknowledging that a bunch of straight white men had been running things. He said he hoped the studio would improve on that in the future. Berg said he had spoken to the investigator at length and truthfully. I let him know that it did mean a lot, Fisher says. I'm not beyond forgiveness when it comes to this kind of stuff. It was a very big thing for him to do, and no one else in the process has reached out to me. Now, that right there really does tell me that that John Berg, he really was it. He really was, from his perspective, I think he was just trying to do his job, and he really did want to keep his job. And to me, like, there's nothing wrong with that unless you really don't apologize for it. And really, that's what Ray Fisher said in the beginning. Like, he doesn't want anyone to be fired. He just wants people to be held accountable or give an apology. And so far, John Berg is the only one that has given him a apology, and really, to that end, like, yeah, like, in terms of John Berg, like, yeah, that's really good of you to do, man. That's really good of you to do. But as with the others, that's to be seen. The studio, meanwhile, defended itself that day in a statement. At no time did Mr. that Mr. Amada ever throw anyone under the bus, as Fisher falsely claimed, or render any judgments about the Justice League production, in which Mr. Amaya had no involvement. The company said Fisher had refused multiple attempts by the investigator to contact him. Fisher saw that as a smear. In early October, top Warner Media execs spoke with Fisher and his team, including a rep from SAG-AFTRA. And yep, when Fisher pressed the question of how the investigator had come to provide the name of an in-house attorney who had nothing to do with the inquiry, a Warner Media executive on the call responded that the investigator had just pulled the name off the internet. Bad move right there. Bad move. Oh. Yeah, here we are. Chrissy Hamburger, hope I said that right, head of the communications at Warner Media and the company's top inclusion officer, said the studio's statement that Fisher had refused to cooperate with the investigation had been based on third-hand information. The studio's communications department had been responding emotionally to Fisher's public allegations against Hamada. She said, adding, I think they believed that they were saying was true. Fisher wondered why anyone at the studio, which was to what is that word? Was ostensibly the subject of the investigation, would comment at all. And really, it does add up. Just from this article alone, after this article came out, film and thanks for film. Shout out to Film God pointing this out on Twitter that there would be a Batman trailer coming out at the same time as this article, which makes sense. Like it happened. So shout out to Film God for that. Pressed by Fisher, Harberger declined to say who at the studio had approved the statement, but she said that she was furious when she read it. I have made it 100% crystal clear to anyone in the entire Warner Brothers Communications organization that not a goddamn word be said about Ray Fisher. Harberger said, if I catch anyone doing that, they're fired. Which I would agree for that. Like, mad respect to that. Fisher says he asked for an apology repeatedly in the weeks that followed. Warner Media kicked around some language that he fell short. Fell short. Ultimately, Harberger told Fisher, I don't think that if people said something they believed was true, and there's an apology needed. After the studio put out the statement accusing him of not cooperating, what Fisher calls the hit piece, he asked for another investigator. Warner Media agreed to bring in Forrest, who they told him had handled the investigation of CEO Tsujihara. Fisher was initially optimistic, but says he again turned weary when Forrest, who is white, led with the fact that he was an Obama appointee. Still, Fisher was somewhat optimistic because he believed Forrest's previous Tsujihara investigation had exposed alleged misconduct, but she told him that she hadn't completed that inquiry before Tsujihara left. Instead, he left after the Hollywood Reporter published an article about his sexual misconduct with aspiring actress Charlotte Kirk. Initially, Fisher was told Forrest would work alongside the original investigator. He objected, and the original investigator withdrew. In December, Fisher says that he and his SAG-AFTRA rep had a final conversation with Forrest, during which she said remedial action had been taken, from which she said Fisher had probably seen, but she was not explicit. She said further remedial action would be taken, but again did not offer specifics. But she told Fisher she did not find evidence of racial animus, and this is what Ann Sarnoff said. To Fisher, the information Forrest shared was so limited that it seemed the purpose was clear. She was only authorized by Warner Media to attempt to explain away anything to do with race. Warner's maintains it as complete confidence in the investigation process and her conclusions. And really, once again, why would you hide stuff from your witnesses that you called for? It doesn't make any sense. On the evening of December 11th, Warner's issued a statement saying that the investigation was finished in what Fisher calls a Friday night news dump. Witnesses contacted him asking what had happened, but he had no answers. A week later, he pressed Hauberger and other execs for more information. They asked him to provide names of anyone who had told him they hadn't gotten closure. Fisher said that he would not provide witnesses. In February, he tweeted that Hamada was the most dangerous kind of enabler who had shown that he would blindly cover for its colleagues and had worked with the studio to destroy a black man's credibility and publicly delegitimize a very serious investigation with lies in the press. And what he was referring to was him refusing to cooperate. That's what he was referring to. The company responded with the statement from Forrest saying Hamada was credible and forthcoming, and it did nothing that implemented or differed with the company's investigation. Fisher believes he dismissed the bigger picture, while he accused Hamada of undermining and tampering with the investigation in a series of tweets. He says these were specifically in reference to the conversation he had with Hamada, in which the executive tried to dissuade Fisher from pursuing his grievances against Johns. Fisher does not, he says, believe that Hamada otherwise actively tried to interfere with the investigation. Sources at the studio, however, point to Fisher's tweets as evidence of shifting grudges and lack of credibility. Before things had gone sour, Fisher was expected to play a supporting role as Cyborg in the planned movie The Flash in June 2020. Fisher says he had a call with director Andy Muschietti that seemed positive, but the discussion hit a snag when Warner's framed a 2-week shoot as a cameo, offering only a fraction of what Fisher says he should have been paid for reappearing as Cyborg. By late September, he was upset by press reports that he was demanding double his pay. And at the time, he said that he didn't even read the script. So, yeah. So here we are, final three paragraphs. Unfortunately, the studio removed the cyborg role from the movie, citing a December 30th tweet. The studio said, given his statement that Mr. Fisher will not will not participate in any film associated with Mr. Amada, our production is now moving on. Fisher says he wasn't surprised. When I first spoke up, I assumed that there was no way these guys would allow me to do my job in peace. He says, now working on the ABC anthology series Women of the Movement. Fisher says he knew the struggle could be costly. I'm not so indebted to Hollywood that I haven't been willing to put myself out there, he says. I don't believe some of these people are fit for positions of leadership, says Fisher, who explains that he's not looking for anyone to be fired. I don't want them to be excommunicated from Hollywood. But I don't think they should be in charge of hiring and firing other people. Fisher knows he's not going to win that battle, but he feels a point has been made. If I can to get accountability, he says, at least I can make people aware of who they're dealing with. And that right there really does solidify what Ray is going for. Like he said, he doesn't want he doesn't want these people to be fired. He at least want he even though he does even if he doesn't want to get accountability, he still wants to let people know and other actors know of the people that they'll be dealing with in WB. So, yeah. Oh, wow. We've been going on for 2 hours. So, yeah. That is a crazy article that that Ray, and really, like I said, this was only Ray's point of view and only his story. This isn't over yet because we also have the other cast members that might come out, but I have a feeling that this isn't over yet. So, yeah, yeah. Like Ray, thanks for this. Thanks for coming out and giving your full perspective on this situation. And thank you to Kim, the writer of the article, for putting the article out. And even though Warner Brothers and Warner Media didn't want you to, you did a great service, Kim and Ray. We're with you, man. We're with you all the way. So, yeah. Peace.